Welcome back, brothers and sisters of Christ. My name is Brianna and I'm back with another video. For today's video is gems you may have missed in the book of Job. So someone had requested that I do a video about signs that God is restoring you. And God had gave me Job to talk about primarily. This was interesting because I had read Job a few months ago, but I didn't fully understand, due to them talking in like parables and stuff pretty much the whole time. I was confused. So some of the stuff from that video I'll be repeating in this video, but yeah, there was other things that I noticed, like as I was writing the topic about God like restoring, how he restores us and using Job as an example. Like I just started recapping and I just thought of so many things in Job that was just crazy. Like it just related to us, our everyday life, today's world, and just different things that stood out and that was just filled with wisdom and just uplifting. So yeah, God just began to give me more, and he made me realize some things in my personal life as well. So I was ministering to myself, as I'm writing that video about how God restores someone that someone else asked me to do for them. I'm like ministering to myself as well as I'm writing it. A lot of times I'm ministering to myself when I write these topics. Like, it's just so refreshing. I felt renewed after reading Job again with the understanding that I have now. So, a few things that I learned from the book of Job. I'm going to point out a few key things here from the book of Job. As I mentioned before, Job was described as blameless, upright. He feared God. He shunned evil. Although Job was all of these things, that did not exempt him from going through hardships. Because some people think because you're a Christian or because you're righteous that you don't do anything to anyone, that they're exempt, from any hardships. People think when you're a Christian, you're supposed to live a good life. Only good things are supposed to happen. You won't go through anything bad, which is not true. And Job example was, that was a great biblical example of that. Because he was seen as righteous, he was seen as upright, but he still had to face hardship. So that lets us know that even if you're righteous, even if you're a good person, even if you have a strong relationship with God, you can still face hard times, difficult times. Secondly, Job's story shows that the enemy targets those who are faithful to God. Although God suggested Job, because he's like, Job was one of my faithful servants, have you tried him? The enemy was also so sure that Job was only faithful to God because he was blessed, because of the things that he had. So he thought that Job would curse God if he lost all his blessings. But Job remained faithful through the trials and tribulations, even though he was confused and questioned God. That also demonstrates that it's okay to have certain emotions when you're going through difficult times and you don't understand what's going on. Yeah, so that showed God's faithfulness, and as I mentioned in the other video, it made me think when I realized that the enemy was like, oh, he's only praising you because you blessed him with all this stuff. If you take all this stuff away, he won't praise you no more. It made me think about my personal life. It made me think about other Christians, just like things that you go through in life when you start following Christ and how you react to those things. Like, are you going to let, like me reading that passage made me think like, wow. So if I go through a hardship as a Christian and I give up, curse God, turn my back on God, that is exactly what the enemy wants. That's exactly what the enemy expected, because he said it in Job. Like, that's what he expected Job to do. So that gives me the motivation, baby, to keep going during my hardships, because that's what the enemy wanted Job to do. So that's what he expects us to do as well when we go through hardships as Christians. And the fact that Job didn't do it and he's standing 10 toes, baby, and y'all know the end. We're going to get to the end of what the reward was. But that's motivation. That's motivation for me, because no, I'm not going to let the enemy win. I'm not going to let him be right. Like I told you, she was going to turn her back on you because she lost all her blessings. Like, absolutely not. And I feel like it made me think about the situation that I mentioned about me losing my engagement ring. I know that's like not something as big as what Job went through, but it's still something, it's an example. Like, that's something that I could have been like mad at God about. Like, how could you let this happen, turn my back on him? But I wasn't going. You know, I kept praising the Lord. You know, so I thought about, like, what if the enemy was like, she's going to turn her back on you now that she lost her ring? But luckily, thank God, I remained steadfast, baby. And the Lord restored my ring. And I paid way less than what it was just, you know. So he restored it in the end. But now this third example is like my personal favorite. Okay, Job's wife had said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Which is what the enemy wanted Job to do, as I mentioned before. But Job's response to his wife was, "You're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And I just love that, because when people follow Christ, they want all the good that comes with following Christ, but they don't want the bad. And, you know, I get it. Who would want the bad that comes with anything? But Job's comment shows that there will be trouble, you know, along the road during this walk. But because you love Christ and follow him, you must be willing and you must be prepared to take anything that comes with following him. You can't just take the good. You need to be willing to take the bad too. You know, the good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly, baby. Like, his comment, I really love that response, because it's like people be so quick. Like, when they getting all the praises, you know, they getting all the blessings, they so happy. Oh, I love God, I love God. But then when things are not going the way that they want, now they're cursing God. Now it's like, what is this? Like, God never said we wasn't going to go through hardships. You know what I mean? He never said only the righteous get blessed and only the wicked go through hard. No, that's not what it is. And Job's comment and passage was just a great response to me. Like, I'm not going to only accept the good that comes with God. I'm going to accept the bad too, baby. Is you in this or not? Like, if you all the way in it, you got to know what to expect, and you better be prepared. You know, we also know that from, you know, Jesus' disciples, but that's another story. You know, they went through it for the name of the Lord. But so when Job's friends had came to comfort him, they began to like accuse him of sin and accuse him of wrongdoing, and basically was saying that his suffering was a result of sin and wrongdoing. You know, that he was being punished. But that was not the case. And because that was not the case, this emphasizes that suffering doesn't always mean punishment, baby. A lot of times when we go through suffering, we go through hardships, we think that we're being punished for something. We don't understand, like, why am I going through this? Did I do something bad? Like, dang, like, this is, you know, a little intense, Lord. But that doesn't, it doesn't always mean punishment. Suffering and hardship, it builds character. It builds perseverance. You know what I'm saying? It strengthens your faith. Like, it's so much more than, oh, I'm being punished. It's so much more to it when it comes to suffering and hardship. You know what I mean? Like, it makes you a better person, a stronger person. It makes you more faithful to the Lord. It helps you trust in the Lord more because you got through that situation with the Lord. Oh, it's so good. And obviously it's not so good. Like, we don't want to go through hardships. But like, when it's over, when it's all said and done, baby, your qualities is just so much stronger. And people just think people don't care about, a lot of people don't really care about qualities. And the Lord, like, reading his word, you come to realize that the Lord is like, he's all about like character. You know what I mean? And integrity. And a lot of the things that we go through in life builds our character. You know what I'm saying? So, and hardships is one of them. But another one here, I should have kept count. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know if this is 5, but God's silence. So, it is normal for God to get silent. And there honestly could be multiple reasons that God gets silent, but he does not stay silent. And he got silent on Job during his hardship for a bit of a time. Although the Bible doesn't mention why God was silent, my assumption and like things that I experienced would be that he was seeing what Job would do during his time of suffering. I have a personal experience of this, and I've heard so many other stories of people going through difficult times and God will get silent, you know, as he did with Job. But the Bible never said that God was angry with Job when he did speak. Like, he did like started getting on Job. I'm not gonna lie. But it never emphasized that he was angry. But him getting silent with Job during his hardship lets us know that God does sometimes get silent. You know, it's not just us that he's getting silent with, and he's not gone during those times. That also let us know that the Lord is working behind the scenes. Also, although he may get quiet sometimes and silent sometimes, and we get frustrated, that doesn't mean that God's not moving. That doesn't mean that God's not working, baby. And a lot of times he wants to see, what are you going to do? What are you going to do during times of suffering? And what are you going to do if I get silent? You know, a lot of times it's a testing of our faith. And that doesn't mean that he's not working on you and moving on your behalf, baby. And then one of the things that Job kept stressing was that he was innocent, you know, that he's upright and he's guiltless. And he was just like trying to prove his innocence a lot. But it doesn't matter how righteous you are, you will go through hardship like everyone else. Even the most faithful servants will go through it. You know, it's similar to what I mentioned at the beginning. But yeah, it doesn't matter about that. God doesn't care about that. You know what I mean? He don't play favorites. Like, we all have to experience things in life. He's not going to pick and choose, you know, but just because you're following Christ doesn't mean that you're not going to go through stuff. And another thing about this, you know, Job, like, trying to prove his innocence, it's like he kind of became like self-righteous during his suffering. Like, his responses was a lot about him and how he's so good and how he doesn't deserve the treating. And he was accusing God of being unfair and accusing God of being unjust. And something interesting, you know, after this, after him and his friends was talking and he was accusing God, like, this is unjust. This ain't right. I'm a good person. Why are you doing this to me? Something interesting about this is the youngest of the men, Elihu, I don't know if I pronounce it, Elihu, okay? He called Job out on his self-righteousness, and he called the friends out on their responses to Job. And one of the things that stood out to me that Elihu said was, wait, I didn't get there yet. Well, he called Job out and he was like, you know, you think this is just, you're saying that I'm in the right and not God. You know, you're saying that you're right and God's not right. You think that that's just, you think that that's right. He called Job out like, what are you talking about? And which is what a lot of people think when they go through difficult times and they feel like they don't deserve it. You know, they become self-righteous as if they have all the answers or understanding above God, which in reality, they don't know nothing. You know, a lot of times we probably don't even know why we go through certain things, but the Lord knows. Like, his ways are just not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And you know, a lot of times people think that they just know it. Like, Lord, like, I'm good. I'm righteous. I'm your faithful servant. Like, why are you doing, you know what I mean? But something else that I noticed in Elihu's first response is when he said, this was in Job chapter 32, verse 7 through 9. I absolutely love this. He was like, I thought age should speak. Advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is a spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty that gives them understanding, baby. It is not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. He was the youngest amongst them all, and he was the only one that got to talking with some sense. He was the only one that called Job out. He called the friends out because he like, y'all all talking crazy right now. And he called it out, and he didn't speak because he was young, and he let everybody else speak. But when they were done speaking, and he like, that's it? That's all y'all got to say? There's more that needs to be said here. He stood up, Elihu, and he started calling everybody out. And I love that response because he was saying that, you know, it's not age that makes a person wise, baby. It's the Lord that gives you wisdom and understanding. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people think that you can only be wise because you've been here for a long time. There's a lot of people that is old in years and still not wise. And not only older people understand what is right. And that's one thing in society that is just, people cannot get through their heads. They think because you're young that you're done. They think because you're young you don't know nothing about nothing. Like, literally about nothing. Like, all my life, people would try to do little slick stuff to play me because they think I'm young and I'm dumb, baby. And I'm not. So it's like, That's something that young people go through on a daily basis. So that stood out to me about Elihu's response, and I loved it. And because that showed that exactly what he said. That literally showed, like, just because you're older in years doesn't mean you have wisdom, and just because you're young doesn't mean you don't have wisdom. And I absolutely love that statement because it's so true. You know, because we always hear that wisdom comes with age and wisdom comes with experience. While that can be true, but it's definitely not always true. And he let it be known that it is the Lord who will give you wisdom, no matter what your age is. You know, people will try to dismiss you because of your age, but when you know the Lord, baby, let me tell you, you know some things. You know some things when you know the Lord. When the Lord spoke to Job, but moving forward from that one, when the Lord spoke to Job regarding all his accusations, the Lord ended up having to put Job in his place, baby. Like, he didn't directly answer Job as to why he went through what he went through, but he began speaking on different things, like his creations and what he does and how he does it. Just a lot of things that was very clear that Job didn't know before. And when God explained all of this, you know, all of these examples that his ways are not ours and our understanding will never be his, it wasn't like, oh, like, I'm God, I can do what I want, you know, which ultimately that is true. But it wasn't like, yeah, I just did it because I wanted to do it. No, it wasn't that. But it was more so of, we won't understand a lot of things that God does or things that happen in our life. You know, it won't make sense to us, but it makes sense to God because he knows things that we don't know. He sees things that we don't see. Like, he knows, you know what I mean? And because he knows things and have understanding beyond ours, we should always trust God's ways, even when we are confused, even when we don't understand. We should always trust his ways, and you should always know that God is right and God is just, and nothing is in vain and nothing is for no reason. So in the end, God restored everything and gave Job twice as much. And that shows God restores what we lost. You know, although, you know, Job stayed down to the come up, baby. And sometimes you have to lose it all to gain more. And although that was not by choice for Job, that was still the outcome. You know, he lost it all, but he gained more in the end. And, you know, this shows that God does restore us. This shows that our suffering is not in vain. Like, Job's story was filled with so many things. You know, Job was an example of what it looks like when you don't turn your back on God during hard times. Although the Bible didn't say this, I always felt like if Job would have cursed God and turned his back on God, you know, that the ending would have been difficult. But, you know, who knows? Because that ain't what happened. So, but that's what I just be thinking about. But Job's story shows that suffering does not last forever, and suffering is not in vain. Even if it feels like it's in vain, it's literally not. And that's, like I always say, it's so important to read our Bible, y'all. These stories, some people think that the Bible is not relatable to today's day and age, and it just baffles me because it literally is. You know what I mean? Just because the Bible, this stuff happened so many years ago, does not mean that it's not relatable to today's day and age, baby. Like, it is so relatable. It is so relatable. And when you're going through things, you can always open up the book and find something. I relate to so many people in the Bible. Like, almost every character in the Bible, I found something that I can relate to. So when you're going through certain things, you can open up your word and find a story, and then you read the outcome. Like right now, if you're going through a season that you feel like God is restoring you, he's stripping you from everything, you read Job, and in the end, baby, you already see the end result. So when you open your Bible and you read these stories, you can see the end. And I know everybody's end's not the same, but all in all, baby, you got to believe and you got to trust. And when you see the ends of these stories, that should give you hope. You know what I mean? Oh God, it's so good. But honestly, I hope I didn't miss anything, because there's probably a lot of points that I probably missed. I hate when I be missing stuff. I always record and be like, oh, I should have said this, and I'd be so mad, and I'd be running to re-record the whole video. But it was a lot of good jewels in Job that relates to us today. And it's so crazy because the first time I read Job, I was so confused. But baby, I get it now. And I know Proverbs is considered the book of wisdom, but honestly, the whole Bible is the book of wisdom, if we're being honest. Like, if you know, you know. It's just filled with so much knowledge. It's filled with life lessons. I just love it so bad. Like, this really, like, fed me spiritually. It really fed my soul. Before I wrote this topic, I was telling my fiance, like, I was writing the one about restoration, and I just started, like, when I was writing that, I started thinking of all these things, like all these points about Job, and I was telling him about it, and he was like, you don't even know. You just spoke to me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just spoke to myself. I'm like, better yet, God's speaking to both of us, because, yeah, Job was good. But, so these are things, gems from Job that you may have missed, that you may have forgot about, things that you may be going through, just some encouragement words on today regarding Job. So I really hope that this bless y'all, bless someone. But if this word is not for you, it's for somebody else. Remember, I'm telling y'all this because I love y'all. God bless.